The instant the Blackstone warehouse gate opened, a stale smell of grain surged up from deep underground. It was not the fragrance of fresh grain. It was the smell of dried rations, mold ash, blood, soil, and years of sealed air mixed together. It was heavy. So heavy that everyone instinctively held their breath. Behind the warehouse gate was a flight of stone steps leading downward. Military runes were carved on both sides of the steps, but most had already gone dim. Every dozen steps or so, a bronze lamp was inserted into the wall. There was no oil in the lamps. But when the military grain talisman in Lin Yao's hand lit up, those lamps ignited one after another with ghostly yellow flames. The firelight illuminated the underground passage. It also illuminated the dry corpses kneeling along both sides. Those dry corpses wore tattered military uniforms. Some held empty grain bags, while others still clutched wooden bowls in their hands. Their postures did not look like they had died in battle. They looked more like people who had starved until the very end, kneeling inside and outside the warehouse gate, waiting for a grain distribution that never came. The expressions of many players in the team changed. One player from the Shin Corporation whispered, "This dungeon atmosphere is way too real." No one answered. Because this place did not feel like a dungeon. It felt more like evidence of a crime sealed away by time. Lin Yao stood before the entrance and did not immediately walk in. He turned back and looked at everyone. After we enter, no one is allowed to take grain privately. Someone in the Shin Corporation team frowned. Lin Yao continued, "No touching military tags, account books, or talisman orders without permission. No attacking spirits that have not attacked first. No leaving the team. Anyone who violates these rules will lose their right to returns according to the contract." Shin Xianzhou said mildly, "The Shin Corporation's people will follow the rules." Shu He also nodded. "Dragon Court will obey command." Su Qingli looked at the dry corpses inside the warehouse gate and said softly, "The Su family will only record. We will not act without permission." Only after all three parties had stated their positions did the team officially enter the military grain cellar. Lin Yao and Gao Mu walked at the very front. Zhao Tai and two new trap formation recruits guarded the left and right. Chen Hao and Shu He's squad stayed in the middle. The Shin Corporation guards covered the rear. Su Qingli and her two record keepers walked slightly behind the center. Guan did not go deep inside. He stayed near the entrance and set up a temporary treatment point, with Qingya and Xiaolan assisting him. The deeper they went, the clearer the whispers of the starved soldier souls became. Open the warehouse. Distribute grain. Where are the accounts? Who took the grain? Who locked the door? At first, the voices were chaotic. But when Lin Yao passed with the military grain talisman raised, they seemed to recognize some kind of identity and withdrew to both sides of the passage. Not in submission. In waiting. Waiting for him to uncover the truth. Waiting for him to give them an answer. Shin Xianzhou watched this scene, and his gaze tightened slightly. He finally realized that the true core authority of the military grain cellar did not depend on how many people someone brought. It lay in the military grain talisman in Lin Yao's hand, and in the reaction of the starved soldiers' souls toward him. Without Lin Yao, even if they found the entrance, they would have to force their way in. And if they forced their way in, the resentment of the entire military grain cellar might riot. At that point, whether they could obtain grain would be uncertain. A batch of players would die first. After reaching the bottom, everyone arrived in the first-floor granary hall. The hall was huge. Rows of stone granaries were stacked around the walls. Each stone granary had a seal strip in front of it. Some seal strips were intact. Some had been torn open. Some warehouse doors were half open, with nothing inside. At the center of the hall stood a collapsed wooden table. Several blackened bamboo slips were pressed beneath it. Beside the table was a dry corpse wearing the uniform of a military clerk. It knelt in front of the table, still holding a broken brush. The moment Lin Yao approached, the military clerk corpse suddenly moved. Everyone instantly tightened their grip on their weapons. Gao Mu raised a hand. "Do not move." The military clerk corpse slowly raised its head. There was no fierce light in its empty eye sockets, only a faint dim yellow flame. Military grain talisman. Who holds the talisman? Lin Yao stepped forward. I do. The military clerk corpse looked at him. To open the warehouse, the accounts must be checked. If the accounts are unclear, the grain cannot be moved. Lin Yao nodded. I will check the accounts. The military clerk corpse trembled as it put down the broken brush in its hand. First floor mission, check the accounts. Mission objective, confirm the flow of grain before the military grain cellar was sealed. Investigable clues, main account books, warehouse sealing order, damaged warehouse doors, military clerk corpse, civilian laborers grain request tags. Lin Yao looked at the others. Investigate the clues first. A player from the Xin Corporation immediately tried to go look at the stone granaries. Lin Yao looked at him coldly. The player's movement froze. Shen Xianzhou spoke. Do as Lord Lin says. Only then did the player withdraw. Su Qingli had already walked toward the account books, but she did not touch them. She only crouched to observe. There is talisman ash on the account books. If they are turned directly, they may be destroyed. Lin Yao looked at the talisman water Pak Guan had left behind. Can they be purified? Su Qingli shook her head. This is not evil qi. It is an anti-tampering military talisman. Gao Mu stepped forward and looked at the account books. A military clerk is needed to open the accounts. Everyone looked at the military clerk corpse. Lin Yao asked, how do we open the accounts? The military clerk corpse said in a low voice, ask the grain. Lin Yao frowned. Ask who? The military clerk corpse raised its hand and pointed around the hall. The soldiers. The people. The clerks. The general. In the next second, four ghostly flames lit up in the four corners of the hall. Within each flame, a fragmentary image emerged. On the east side, there was a group of armored soldiers. On the west side, civilian laborers and refugees. On the south side, military clerks and warehouse guards. On the north side, the back of a general whose face could not be seen. A system prompt surfaced. Account opening condition, hear testimony from all four sides. Warning, the four testimonies contradict one another. Judge carefully. Xin Xianzhou said in a low voice, this is not a dungeon. It is a trial. Lin Yao glanced at him. That is why I said grain is not a reward. He first walked toward the soldier remnants on the east side. Those soldiers stood very straight. Even as ghostly remnants, they still maintained their formation. The leading soldier's voice was hoarse. The front line went 3 days without grain. If the grain was not reserved, the army formation would collapse. If the army collapsed, the stronghold would fall. If the stronghold fell, everyone would die. Lin Yao asked, so you demanded that grain be kept for the soldiers? The soldier answered, yes. How many soldiers were there? 800 combat soldiers. How much grain did you actually receive? The soldier was silent. After a moment, he answered, less than 2 days. Lin Yao recorded it. Then he walked toward the civilian laborer and refugee remnants on the west side. The remnant of a woman holding a child raised her head, her voice filled with resentment. They said the soldiers needed to eat. But we were also repairing walls, carrying stones, and transporting arrows. Were we not people? The children starved to death at the warehouse gate. The grain was right behind the door. Why was it not distributed? Lin Yao asked, how many of you were there? 3,000 civilian laborers. The refugees were too many to count. Did you ever try to seize grain? A laborer beside the woman lowered his head. We did. Why? Because if we did not, we would starve to death. How much did you seize? None. Who stopped you? The laborer looked toward the south side. The warehouse guards. Lin Yao walked toward the military clerk and warehouse guard remnants on the south side. The military clerk remnant was clearer than the others. He wore an old clerk's robe and held an account book in his arms. Grain has fixed amounts. Soldier grain cannot be moved. Civilian grain had already been fully distributed. Rear supply lines were cut. If the war reserve warehouse was opened, the front line would collapse. Lin Yao asked, did you hide grain for yourselves? The military clerk suddenly raised his head. No. For the first time, his voice became intense. If I hid grain, let military law punish me. Lin Yao looked at him. Can the account books prove it? The military clerk was silent. The accounts are sealed. Who sealed them? The military clerk looked toward the general on the north side. Finally, Lin Yao walked toward the general's back. That figure was the tallest and the most indistinct. He stood in the darkness like a mountain pressing down on everyone's head. Lin Yao asked, were you the one who ordered the warehouse sealed? The general did not turn around. Yes. Reason? To hold the stronghold. Did you know civilian laborers and refugees were starving outside the warehouse? I knew. Did you know the military clerk was hated because of it? I knew. Did you know the soldiers failed to hold in the end? The general was silent for a long time. I knew. Lin Yao continued, then do you believe you are guilty? The general's back finally moved slightly. If I could do it again, I would still seal the warehouse. The instant those words were spoken, all the starved soldier souls in the hall became restless. There was grain, and he would not distribute it. He is guilty. Open the warehouse. Kill. The soldier remnants also roared. If the warehouse was not sealed, the front line would have collapsed first. If the civilian laborers rioted, the army could not defend either. The general's order was not wrong. The four remnants began crashing against one another. The entire military grain cellar shook. Warning, testimony conflict intensifying. Please make a preliminary ruling, Lord. All eyes fell on Lin Yao. Xin Xianzhou, Su Qingli, and Chu Yi did not speak. This kind of ruling could not be made by outsiders. Because the military grain talisman was in Lin Yao's hand. And the starved soldier souls were waiting for his answer. Lin Yao was silent for a long time. He did not rush to decide who was guilty. Instead, he walked back to the central account table. Open the accounts. The military clerk corps raised its head. Without judging the crime, the accounts cannot be opened. Lin Yao's voice was calm. It is precisely because the crime has not been judged that the accounts must be opened. The soldiers say the grain was insufficient. The laborers say the grain was inside the warehouse. The clerk says civilian grain was already exhausted. The general says he sealed the warehouse to hold the stronghold. All four sides have reason, and all four sides have resentment. Without checking the accounts, everyone will only tell the half of the truth that belongs to them. The whispers in the hall slowly stopped. The yellow flame in the military clerk corpse's eye sockets trembled. If the accounts open, the crime will appear. Lin Yao looked at it. Then let the crime appear. After a long time, the military clerk corpse lowered its head. It reached out and pressed its hand against the account books. The military talisman ash sealing the bamboo slips slowly dispersed. Main account books opened. You have obtained investigation authority. Lin Yao picked up the first account book. It recorded the flow of grain in the 3 days before the warehouse was sealed. The first day. 800 combat soldiers. 70% grain ration issued. 500 auxiliary soldiers. 50% grain ration issued. 3,000 civilian laborers. 30% grain ration issued. Refugees. Not entered into the military rolls. The second day. 800 combat soldiers. 50% grain ration issued. 500 auxiliary soldiers. 30% grain ration issued. 3,000 civilian laborers. Distribution stopped. Refugees. Not entered into the military rolls. The third day. 800 combat soldiers. 30% grain ration issued. Auxiliary soldiers. Distribution stopped. Civilian laborers. Distribution stopped. Refugees. Not entered into the military rolls. The fourth day. War Reserve warehouse sealed. All remaining grain reserved for the final defending combat soldiers. Up to this point, the account book matched what the general and the military clerk had said. But when Lin Yao turned to the next volume, his eyes changed. Special transfer, 200 sacks of fine grain transferred into the inner storehouse. Purpose, unknown. Signed order, Military Stronghold Supervisor. Supervisor. The moment this word appeared, Gao Mu's expression instantly darkened. Not the general. Lin Yao asked, "Who is the supervisor?" Gao Mu's voice was very cold. "The one who watches the army. Sometimes, more frightening than the enemy." Lin Yao continued checking the accounts. The third volume was even more obscure. A large amount of fine grain had not been issued to the frontline combat soldiers, nor to the civilian laborers. It had been transferred into the inner storehouse. In name, it was for preserving military morale, supplying wounded soldiers, and preparing for evacuation. But there were no later records of expenditure. Lin Yao raised his head and looked at the general remnant on the north side. "Did you know about the inner storehouse?" The general did not answer. The military clerk remnant on the south side trembled all over. "The inner storehouse cannot be investigated." Lin Yao's eyes darkened. The real problem had been found. It was not simply a fight between soldiers and civilians over grain. There was a third party who had hidden the grain. Lin Yao put down the account books. First floor ruling. All the remnants looked at him. Lin Yao's voice was clear. The soldiers held the stronghold. Not guilty. The civilian laborers sought grain. Not guilty. The military clerks issued grain according to the books. Responsible, but guilt not yet determined. The general sealed the warehouse to hold the stronghold. Responsible, but guilt not yet determined. What truly needs to be investigated is the flow of fine grain into the inner storehouse. Before the inner storehouse is investigated, no death crime will be determined. As his words fell, the resentment in the hall did not vanish completely, but it clearly dropped. A system prompt surfaced. First floor ruling accepted. You did not rashly push blame onto soldiers or the starving people. Second floor of the military grain cellar, inner storehouse, opened. Deep inside the hall, a small door that had originally been sealed by Blackstone slowly opened. Behind the door came a smell completely different from the outside. It was not moldy grain. It was the stink of rotted wine and meat. Zhao Tai's face darkened. Looks like someone was eating pretty well. Shen Xianzhou also put away his smile. Su Qingli said quietly, "This is the true crime of the military grain cellar." Lin Yao tightened his grip on the military grain talisman and walked toward the inner storehouse. The first floor asked whether grain should go to soldiers or civilians. The second floor would investigate who had hidden grain while everyone else starved. After the inner storehouse door opened, the atmosphere within the team completely changed. The first floor had been oppressive, but at least it was still a difficult choice during war. Soldiers needed to eat. The people also needed to eat. There was not enough grain. Sealing the warehouse might be cruel, but it was not necessarily all selfish. But the smell coming from the inner storehouse made everyone understand that the matter was not that clean. When everyone entered the second floor, firelight rose. The inner storehouse was much smaller than the outer layer. But it was better preserved. More complete ceiling runes were carved into the walls. Several decayed long tables stood in the center. On the tables, they could still see dried wine jars, bones, and broken plates. Closed stone cabinets stood on all sides. Some had already cracked, revealing grain hardened into blocks inside. It was not coarse grain. It was fine grain. There was even jerky and medicinal herbs. Outside on the first floor, the starved soldier souls had asked why grain had not been distributed. Yet inside the second floor storehouse, traces of wine and meat banquets remained. That contrast made people angrier than any monster could. Zhao Tai's grip on his saber creaked. The people outside starved to death, and the people inside were drinking wine? No one answered. Because the answer was right in front of them. Even one of the Shin Corporation players could not help cursing. Shui's face was iron blue. Su Qingli immediately had her record keepers copy the runes and remaining account plaques on the wall. Lin Yao did not rush to open the stone cabinets. He first looked toward the center of the hall. There sat a dry corpse wearing ornate official robes. The robes were different from those of a military clerk, and also different from those of a general. They were more like the robes of a supervisor or grain overseer. In front of the corpse lay a bronze seal. The bronze seal had already turned black, but the two characters for grain supervisor could still be seen. The moment Lin Yao approached, ghostly green flames lit up inside the corpse's eye sockets. It slowly raised its head, its voice sharp and grating. Military grain restricted area. No entry without an order. Gao Mu said coldly, "Did the people who starved outside have an order?" The grain supervisor corpse ignored Gao Mu. It looked at the military grain talisman in Lin Yao's hand. "Talisman holder. Why do you trespass into the inner storehouse?" Lin Yao answered calmly, "To check the accounts." The green flame inside the grain supervisor corpse flickered. "The accounts are outside. There are no accounts in the inner storehouse. Because there are no accounts in the inner storehouse, it must be checked even more." Lin Yao looked at the stone cabinets. The outer account books record that 200 sacks of fine grain were transferred into the inner storehouse for unknown purpose. Now, I want to know where they went. The grain supervisor corpse was silent for a moment, then suddenly laughed. The sound was like cracked bamboo scraping together. Soldier grain. Reward grain. To stabilize military morale. Zhao Tai said angrily, "Whose military morale?" The soldiers outside were starving too. The grain supervisor corpse turned toward Zhao Tai. Low soldiers and cheap commoners. What do they know of the larger picture? Zhao Tai's eyes chilled, and he almost rushed forward. Gao Mu pressed a hand on his shoulder. "Do not be provoked." Lin Yao saw it too. This grain supervisor corpse was not an ordinary resentful soul. Its body carried very strong malice, and it retained part of its consciousness from life. It was not like the starved soldiers' souls outside, who were asking for answers. It was making excuses. A system prompt surfaced. Second floor mission: investigate the inner storehouse. Mission objective: confirm the flow of fine grain and evidence of the grain supervisor's crime. Warning: the grain supervisor's remnant soul will obstruct the investigation. Xianzhou walked to a stone cabinet. Can we open it? Lin Yao glanced over. Civilization analysis surfaced. Sealed stone cabinet. Contains fine grain residue. Risk: opening may trigger an attack from the grain supervisor's remnant soul. Lin Yao said, wait. He first walked toward the long tables. There were 3 wine jars on the table. 2 were empty, and 1 was still sealed. After checking it, Su Qingli's record keeper said, this is not ordinary wine. It is qi-replenishing medicinal wine. Lin Yao examined it. Military qi-replenishing wine. Purpose: restore stamina for wounded soldiers and elite combat soldiers. Actual status: misappropriated by the grain supervisor for private use. First clue. Then there were the bones on the long table. Salted meat remains. Source: military grain jerky. Purpose: originally meant to supply frontline wounded soldiers. Second clue. In the corner, there was a small wooden box that had been overturned. Several pieces of broken silver and jade were scattered inside. Privately hidden wealth. Source: exchanged grain for wealth. Description: the grain supervisor once secretly exchanged fine grain with powerful people inside the military stronghold for valuables. Third clue. Lin Yao listed them one by one. The grain supervisor corpse's aura began to turn cold. Slander. Wartime transfers were within this official's authority. Lin Yao ignored it and continued investigating. Deep inside the inner storehouse, there was a small door. A lock hung on it. The moment Lin Yao approached, the grain supervisor corpse suddenly stood. You may not enter. So it was here. Lin Yao's gaze sharpened. Open the door. Ghostly green resentment erupted from the grain supervisor corpse. Those who trespass into the inner treasury shall be executed. The stone cabinets around them shook at the same time. Several dry corpses dressed as warehouse guards stood from the corners. They held short blades, ghostly flames burning in their eye sockets. The Shin Corporation guards immediately raised shields. Dragon Court players drew swords. Zhao Tai also tightened his grip on his saber. Lin Yao said coldly, do not cut down the grain supervisor. Suppress the warehouse guards first. Gao Mu nodded. New trap formation recruits, press forward. Zhao Tai led the 2 recruits forward. This time, the enemies were not translucent soldier souls, but dry corpses driven by resentment. Physical attacks worked. Zhao Tai cut off one warehouse guard corpse's arm with a single slash. Chen Hao followed with a heavy cleave, splitting another corpse's chest open. The Shin Corporation and Dragon Court people also joined the fight. But the grain supervisor remnant soul kept shrieking. Every time it screamed, the resentment in the inner storehouse grew heavier. Some players even began seeing illusions. They saw themselves sitting at a banquet table. People wailed outside. But inside the door, wine and meat were still warm. One Shin Corporation player looked dazed and actually reached for the rotten meat on the table. Su Qingli immediately slapped the back of his hand with her sword. Wake up! The player snapped awake, his face deathly pale. You were pulled by greed, Su Qingli said. Guan was not here, so Lin Yao could only use limited talisman water to stabilize the situation. He looked at the grain supervisor remnant soul. This thing could not simply be killed. Killing it might clear the stage, but the evidence might not be complete. The second floor mission objective was to investigate the inner storehouse. They had to open that small door. Lin Yao said to Chengshan, "The door lock." Chengshan immediately understood and slipped toward the small door along the edge of the battlefield. When the grain supervisor noticed, it immediately shrieked. "Stop him!" Two warehouse guard corpses turned toward Chengshan. Zhao Tai roared and slammed one of them aside. "Your opponent is here." Chen Hao blocked the other one. Chengshan rushed to the door and looked at the lock. "My lord, it needs a key." Lin Yao looked at the grain supervisor's waist. A string of bronze keys hung there. Shu He understood at once and activated a charge, sweeping toward the side of the grain supervisor. The grain supervisor swung a mass of ghostly green resentment. Shui blocked it with his shield, his face paling. War Soul Protection lit up in Lin Yao's palm and pressed down on the grain supervisor. The grain supervisor's movement stalled. Shui seized the opportunity and cut the cord of keys at its waist with one sword strike. The bronze keys flew out. Chengshan rushed over, caught them, and quickly opened the small door. The moment the door opened, a stench even thicker than that of the inner storehouse surged out. Everyone stopped for an instant. Behind the door was not grain. It was a small secret room. Large amounts of fine grain sacks were stacked inside. But above the grain sacks lay more than a dozen skeletons. They were not the starved dead outside. They wore ordinary uniforms of warehouse guards and civilian laborers. It looked as if they had been locked inside and starved alive. On the deepest wall, a line had been written in blood. "The grain is here. The door will not open. The grain supervisor is guilty." The entire inner storehouse fell deathly silent. The grain supervisor remnant soul shrieking stopped abruptly. Lin Yao walked into the secret room and picked up a blood-stained wooden tag. Secret room blood evidence. Content: the grain supervisor secretly hid fine grain. To cover up the crime, he sealed informed warehouse guards and civilian laborers inside the inner treasury. Evidence completeness high. A system prompt sounded. You have found core evidence of the grain supervisor's crime. Second floor investigation complete. The grain supervisor remnant soul trembled all over, its ghostly green flame flickering violently. It was not me. War demands extraordinary measures. I was only preserving grain. I did it for the military stronghold. Lin Yao walked out of the secret room and looked at it. You were not sealing a warehouse. You were hiding grain. You were not protecting military grain. You were trading soldier grain for wealth, and using human lives to bury the evidence. The grain supervisor remnant soul screamed, I am the grain supervisor. The grain is under my authority. Lin Yao said coldly, then the crime is under your burden as well. As his words fell, the voices of the starved soldier souls outside surged into the inner storehouse like a tide. Guilty. The grain supervisor is guilty. The grain was in the inner storehouse. We starved to death. The grain supervisor remnant soul tried to flee, but countless strands of resentment locked it down. A system prompt surfaced. Second floor ruling, the grain supervisor secretly hid military grain, sealed and killed those who knew, and the evidence is conclusive. Execute judgment? Lin Yao did not immediately choose. He asked Gao Mu, according to military law? Gao Mu's eyes were icy. Beheading. Lin Yao nodded. Execute. In the next second, Zhao Tai, Chen Hao, Shu He, and the Xin Corporation guards struck together. The grain supervisor remnant soul was suppressed by war soul protection and the resentment of the starved dead, unable to dodge. Zhao Tai cut down with one saber strike. The ghostly green flame burst apart. The grain supervisor remnant soul let out one last miserable scream and completely collapsed. The seals on the stone cabinets around the inner storehouse unlocked one after another. Second floor judgment complete. The grain supervisor's crime has been determined. You have obtained inner storehouse fine grain. You have obtained logistics crime evidence. You have obtained clue to the third floor entrance of the military grain cellar. The Shin Corporation team looked at the unsealed fine grain with burning eyes. But this time, no one dared to reach out privately. Because everyone understood now. In this military grain cellar, grain was not ordinary loot. Lives were pressed down on top of it. Before taking it, they first had to ask clearly. After the grain supervisor remnant soul was cut down, most of the resentment in the inner storehouse dispersed. The stone cabinets opened one by one. Inside were large amounts of fine grain, jerky, herbs, and a small amount of military supplies. If one only looked at the quantity, this was a resource haul that would make people envious. The Shin Corporation players' eyes burned. The Dragon Court players were clearly tempted as well. Even the people of Obsidian Village could not help looking toward those grain sacks. Obsidian Village had been short of grain for too long. Ever since Lin Yao descended into the Blackstone wasteland, grain had been like a rope tightening around everyone's neck. Now, so much grain was right before them. No one could remain completely calm. But Lin Yao did not order it moved. He looked at the system panel. Second floor completed. The grain supervisor's crime has been determined. Inner storehouse grain unsealed. Warning, outer layer starved resentment has not yet been pacified. If the grain is directly moved away, a riot of the starved dead will trigger. As expected, the criminal had been executed. But the people who starved to death had not yet received an explanation. Lin Yao returned to the first floor hall. The outer starved soldier souls had already gathered near the warehouse gate. They were no longer frantic, but they still stared fixedly toward the inner storehouse. Grain. Distribute grain. We are hungry. The children starved to death. The soldier remnants from the first floor were still there too. They also looked at the grain. But unlike the starved dead, they did not plead. They stood silently in formation. This was the hardest part. The grain had been found. The grain supervisor was guilty. But how should the grain be distributed? If all of it was given to the starved resentment, military morale would be unsettled. If all of it was distributed as battle spoils, public resentment would erupt. If it was only divided according to the contract among the living player forces, that would be no different from repeating the grain supervisor's crime. Shen Xianzhou walked to Lin Yao's side. Lord Lin, the contract contains return distribution. Lin Yao looked at him. The contract divides mission returns, not resentment settlement. Shen Xianzhou frowned. You want to use the grain to appease the dead first? Not appease. Lin Yao looked at the starved soldier souls. Back pay. Shen Xianzhou was silent. Su Qingli said softly, if you allocate grain to the dead, the actual returns may decrease. I know. The Shin Corporation may not accept that. Lin Yao said, the Shin Corporation only divides the returns that can be carried away. If we do not settle the dead first, no one carries anything away. Shu He nodded. I agree. Shen Xianzhou glanced at Shu He and did not immediately object. He had also seen the system warning. Although he could not see Lin Yao's full prompt, he could feel that the atmosphere here was wrong. The military grain cellar was not an ordinary warehouse. If they moved the grain directly, the consequences would be severe. Lin Yao walked to the center of the hall and placed the military grain talisman on the account table. Open the inner storehouse accounts. The military clerk corps raised its head. The inner storehouse crime is clear. How should the grain be issued? Lin Yao answered, first settle the debt accounts. The flame in the military clerk corps's eye sockets trembled. What are debt accounts? Lin Yao looked toward the outer starved dead. Those who starved to death before the warehouse. Those sealed in the secret room. Those whose grain was stopped because of the grain supervisor's embezzlement. These are debt accounts. If the debt accounts are not settled, the living cannot take grain. After those words fell, the entire military grain cellar became terrifyingly quiet. Even the Shin Corporation players stopped speaking. The starved soldier souls raised their heads one by one. They had no eyes, but everyone could feel that they were looking at Lin Yao. The military clerk corps slowly lowered its head. How are debt accounts settled? Lin Yao was silent for a moment. This was the key. The truly dead could no longer eat grain. So compensating them with grain did not mean letting the dead carry grain away. It meant acknowledging the share they should have received but never did. In other words, it required accounts, names, and restitution. He said, first divide the inner storehouse grain into 3 parts. The first part will be recorded as the starved debt account. No force will carry it away. It will be used for sacrificial grain, resentment pacification, and the raising of a stele. The second part will be returned to the military grain cellar's original military account. It will be used to settle soldiers' soul remnants and archive military orders. Only the third part will be treated as present world returns and divided among the contracted parties. Shin Shenzhou's expression changed slightly. 1/3 cannot be carried away? Lin Yao corrected him. Not necessarily 1/3. The ratio will be determined after checking the accounts. Shin Shenzhou frowned. Lord Lin, do you know what this means? I do. You are reducing the returns of all cooperating parties. I am preventing all cooperating parties from being torn apart by starved soldier souls. Shin Shenzhou was silent. Lin Yao looked at him. Mr. Shin, the Shin Corporation is skilled at resource calculation. Then you should understand that safely carrying away 60% is better than taking 100% and never getting out. A smile flashed through Su Qingli's eyes. Chui lowered his voice and said to the Dragon Court players, follow Lord Lin's method. Shin Shenzhou thought for a moment and finally said, fine. But the ratio must be public. Lin Yao nodded. Of course. That was exactly what he wanted. Public. Transparent. Let the dead, the soldiers, and the player forces all see the reason for the distribution. The military clerk corps took out a new account book. This account book had originally been blank. Now, under the light of the military grain talisman, words began to appear. Debt account calculation in progress. Those who failed to receive grain due to the grain supervisor's embezzlement, 762 civilian laborers, 210 auxiliary soldiers, 43 wounded soldiers, refugees not entered into rolls. Those sealed and killed in the secret room, 12 warehouse guards, 9 civilian laborers. Outer warehouse starved resentment total, high. Recommended compensation, 30% of inner storehouse grain, to be used for sacrificial grain and steel raising. 30%. Shin Shenzhou's brow twitched. 30% of the grain could not be carried away. That price was not small. But it was still within acceptable range. Then the military account surfaced. The War Reserve Warehouse was originally meant to supply the final defending combat soldiers. 800 combat soldiers. Actual issued grain was less than 3 days. Military morale unsettled. Recommended reserve, 10% of inner storehouse grain, to be used for soldier soul settlement and military order archival. Another 10%. In other words, 40% of the grain would remain in the military grain cellar to deal with resentment and military morale. Only the remaining 60% would be distributable returns. According to the contract, Obsidian Village would take 65%, the Shin Corporation 25%, and Dragon Court 10%. The Su family would not take grain. In practical terms, Obsidian Village would receive 39% of all inner storehouse grain. The Shin Corporation would receive 15%. Dragon Court would receive 6%. That was far less than the surface return. Some people in the Shin Corporation team were dissatisfied, but Shinshenzhou raised a hand and suppressed them. He looked at Lin Yao. If settling the debt accounts and military accounts grants additional reputation or follow-up clues, this ratio is acceptable. Lin Yao said, "It will." His tone was certain. Not because he blindly believed the system would compensate them, but because the core of this mission was not the amount of grain. If the debt account and military account were handled correctly, something deeper would inevitably open. Sure enough, after Lin Yao confirmed the account settlement, a system prompt sounded. You have chosen to settle the debt accounts and pacify the military accounts. Starved resentment begins to calm. Soldier military morale has been acknowledged. Military grain cellar resentment decreased. Third floor entrance stabilized. Inside the inner storehouse, 30% of the grain turned into faint yellow light and drifted toward the outer starved soldier souls. Those starved soldier souls stretched out their hands and no longer wailed. It was as if they had truly received a bowl of grain that had arrived many years too late. The remnant of a woman holding a child knelt on the ground and wept quietly. The child's figure slowly became clearer in her arms, then gradually faded. Not vanishing in agony, but leaving in peace. On the other side, 10% of the military grain turned into black-red military chi and flowed toward the soldier remnants. Those silent soldiers formed ranks again. They did not cheer. They only gave Lin Yao a neat military salute. Cao Mu looked at this scene, his eyes faintly reddening. He quickly lowered his head and hid his emotions. Starved debt accounts settled. Soldiers' soul military accounts pacified. You have obtained title progress, Public Ledger Lord. Obsidian Village's public morale faith system has obtained concept reinforcement, public distribution. Trap Formation Camp's military morale has obtained concept reinforcement, grain has its accounts. Lin Yao's eyes moved. Public Ledger Lord. Public distribution. Grain has its accounts. These things did not look like direct combat power, but they could be extremely important for the territory's long-term development. Goen was right. People did not only fear scarcity. They feared not being told clearly. In a world where resources were scarce, public distribution itself was the root of order. After the accounts were settled, distributable grain finally entered the present world. Sacks of military grain appeared in the center of the hall. They no longer carried resentment. They were resources that could truly be moved away. System settlement. Distributable military grain, 420 units of high-quality aged military grain. Military jerky, 80 units. Replenishing herbs, 30 units. Logistics tools, assorted. Of these, Obsidian Village could receive 273 units of military grain. 52 units of jerky. The herbs would be calculated separately according to the contract. The Su family could transcribe the herb records but would not take physical items. The Shin Corporation could receive 105 units of military grain. Dragon Court could receive 42 units of military grain. This return was less than what the Shin Corporation had initially expected, But the mission progress was clearly more stable. More importantly, the entrance to the third floor had opened. The military clerk corps looked at Lin Yao, its voice no longer hollow. The debt accounts are settled. The military accounts are pacified. But the warehouse sealing order remains unclear. Lin Yao looked toward the depths of the hall. There, a stone door leading to an even lower level slowly opened. 4 characters were carved on the door. Warehouse sealing military order. Gao Mu's expression changed. The third floor investigates the general's order. Lin Yao nodded. The first floor checked the accounts. The second floor determined the crime. The third floor would finally face the general who had ordered the warehouse sealed. Was he a criminal? Or someone burdened with a military order he had no choice but to carry out? The answer lay on the next floor. After the entrance to the third floor opened, the entire military grain cellar's aura became even heavier. The first floor was hunger. The second floor was greed. The third floor was a kind of military order that pressed on the chest until breathing became difficult. Behind that stone door, there was no stench of rot and no smell of wine and meat. Only cold. Like a military tent sealed for years. Everyone descended the stone steps. The deeper they went, the more complete the military talismans on the walls became. That meant the third floor was more important than the first 2. It was also closer to the true core of the military grain cellar. Gao Mu walked very slowly. His hand remained pressed against his saber hilt. Not because he feared an enemy would suddenly appear, but because he seemed to be drawing close to a memory he did not want to recall. Lin Yao glanced at him. Can you hold up? Gao Mu was silent for a moment. I can. If you remember anything, say it immediately. Yes. This time, Gao Mu did not pretend to be stronger than he was. Because he knew the warehouse sealing military order might be connected to the trap formation army's final battle. At the end of the stone steps was an enormous underground military council chamber. At the center stood a Blackstone military table. Several small flags were planted on it. The flags had decayed, but their positions remained. Eastern Line. Western Line. Military Stronghold. Weapon Tomb. Granary. Each position was marked with a black stone plaque. Behind the military table stood the general's remnant. This time, he was no longer only a back view. Everyone finally saw his appearance. He was about 40, wearing damaged armor, with a cold, hard face and deeply sunken eyes. Half of a broken spear was lodged in his chest. Yet he still stood very straight. He did not look like a resentful ghost. He looked more like a general who had not removed his armor even in death. A system prompt surfaced. Third floor, warehouse sealing military order. Objective: investigate the reason the general sealed the warehouse. Current remnant soul, Blackstone Guardian General, Wei Chengshan. Status: military order remnant. Warning: if the ruling is incorrect, it will trigger backlash from either the military souls or the starved dead. Wei Chengshan. The moment this name appeared, Gao Mu's body visibly shook. Lin Yao asked, "You recognize him?" Gao Mu's voice was hoarse. Blackstone Guardian General. In the Trap Formation Army's final battle, he was one of the commanders. Zhao Tai could not help whispering, "So he was the one who ordered the warehouse sealed?" Gao Mu did not answer. But his silence was the answer. Wei Chengshan's remnant looked at the military grain talisman in Lin Yao's hand. Talisman holder. Did you check the accounts? Lin Yao nodded. I did. Did you determine the grain supervisor's crime? I did. Did you settle the debt accounts? I did. Did you pacify the military accounts? I did. Wei Chengshan was silent for a moment. Then you have come to ask the crime of this general. Lin Yao walked to the military table. He did not immediately ask for guilt. He looked at the military table first. Civilization analysis surfaced. Blackstone military table. Status, well preserved. Can view the final 7 days of military intelligence from the Lost Stronghold. Hint, military intelligence records will affect the warehouse ceiling ruling. Lin Yao placed his hand on the military table. Battlefield records unfolded before his eyes one after another. Final 7th day. Blackstone outer defense line fell. 320 wounded soldiers. More than 3,000 civilian laborers. Refugees gathered, not entered into military roles. Remaining grain, insufficient for 3 days for all personnel. Final 6th day. Rear supply lines cut. Weapon tomb entrance seal loosened. Military stronghold received highest military order, hold Blackstone to the death. Do not allow the weapon tomb to open. Final 5th day. The grain supervisor proposed sealing the warehouse. Wei Chengshan rejected it and ordered daily ration reductions to maintain minimum consumption for soldiers and civilians. At this point, Lin Yao's eyes shifted slightly. On the 5th day, Wei Chengshan had not directly sealed the warehouse. He had once rejected the grain supervisor. Final 4th day. Civilian laborer riot. Some charged the outer warehouse. Warehouse guards killed 23 people. Wei Chengshan ordered the warehouse open to pacify the people, issuing 300 sacks of coarse grain. When Qin Xianzhou saw this, his gaze tightened. He opened the warehouse. Su Qingli said softly, so he did not choose to sacrifice the civilian laborers from the beginning. Lin Yao continued reading. Final 3rd day. Black Tide attacked the western line. Combat soldier casualties exceeded half. Weapon tomb entrance crack expanded. Signs of corpse transformation appeared inside the military stronghold. Wei Chengshan ordered the final reserve grain transferred into the inner storehouse, preparing to divide it in batches between defending soldiers and formation repairing civilian laborers. Cao Mu's expression grew darker and darker. Because this did not completely match the remnants outside on the first floor. The final reserve grain had been transferred into the inner storehouse not originally for private hiding. It had been prepared for more careful distribution. The problem was that the grain supervisor intercepted the grain in the middle. Final 2nd day. The grain supervisor falsely reported that grain was exhausted. Civilian laborer grain distribution stopped. Auxiliary soldier grain distribution stopped. Combat soldier rations reduced to 30%. Wei Chengshan was at the front line suppressing the weapon tomb crack and could not verify the grain accounts in time. Zhao Tai could not help cursing. So that grain supervisor deceived both above and below? Cao Mu's voice was icy. When the rear collapses during war, a frontline general may not know where every sack of grain has gone. Lin Yao continued reading. Final 1st day. Weapon tomb entrance about to lose control. Civilian laborers and refugees launched large-scale assault on the granary. Starved resentment contaminated the military grain cellar. Wei Chengshan returned to aid the granary and discovered corruption in the inner storehouse. The grain supervisor had died in the chaos. Remaining grain insufficient to simultaneously maintain defending soldiers, civilian laborers, and the sealing ritual. Wei Chengshan ordered, seal the warehouse. At this point, the light on the military table dimmed. Lin Yao raised his head and looked at Wei Chengshan. You discovered the corruption in the inner storehouse? Wei Chengshan nodded. Too late. The grain supervisor was already dead? killed in the civilian laborer riot. Zhao Tai frowned. Then what did we cut down just now? Gao Mu answered, the crime soul. The man died, but the crime did not disperse. Wei Chengshan looked at the military table. When this general returned to the granary that day, the civilian laborers had already reached the warehouse gate. The grain left inside was barely enough to feed the defenders for one day. If it was issued to the laborers, the weapon tomb seal would break. If it was supplied to the soldiers, the laborers and refugees would die. Chen Hao said in a low voice, this is the hardest choice. Lin Yao asked, you chose the soldiers? Wei Chengshan nodded. I chose the soldiers. Why? Wei Chengshan raised his head. Because once the weapon tomb opened, the dead would not only be the people inside the stronghold. 30 li behind the Blackstone defense line, there were 7 villages. Farther back was a commandery grain road. If the things inside the weapon tomb came out, even more people would die. The hall fell silent. This was not an excuse. At least, not entirely. Wei Chengshan had not acted to save himself. Nor had he acted out of greed. He had made a choice between a smaller number of people and a greater number. And after making that choice, he had also died here. Su Qingli said softly, so this is what the Su family's ancient records meant when they said the Blackstone Guardian General carried an evil name. Shen Xianzhou looked at her. You knew? Su Qingli shook her head. I only knew that the Blackstone Guardian General sealed the warehouse, causing the military grain seller's resentment to persist. I did not know about the inner storehouse corruption, nor that the weapon tomb crack had already gone out of control. Lin Yao looked at Wei Chengshan. What happened after the warehouse was sealed? Wei Chengshan was silent for a moment. Civilian laborers and refugees died outside the warehouse. Some of the starved resentment contaminated the granary. The defending soldiers ate the final batch of grain. That night, the trap formation army and the Blackstone defenders jointly sealed the outer crack of the weapon tomb. But the military stronghold fell completely as well. Before death, this general ordered the plank road leading to the weapon tomb burned. Lin Yao took out the broken military order. Was sealing the weapon tomb in trance your order? When Wei Chengshan saw that fragment of broken military order, his expression changed visibly for the first time. You received the flag officer's order? Yes. You accepted it? I did. Wei Chengshan stared at Lin Yao. Do you know that this order is not to open the weapon tomb, but to seal it? I know. Do you know that inside the weapon tomb are war soul troop types, ancient weapons, military banners, and also things that were sealed away? I know part of it. Wei Chengshan stepped forward. And you still accepted? Lin Yao said calmly, if I do not accept it, the Blackstone wasteland will sooner or later be opened recklessly by others. Those words made Wei Chengshan fall silent. It was as if he could see the present situation. Outsiders. Corporations. Guilds. Ancient families. Players. Everyone was searching for the weapon tomb. Everyone wanted the benefits inside. But not everyone knew why the weapon tomb had been sealed in the first place. Wei Chengshan looked at Shen Xianzhou, Su Qingli, Chui, and then back at Lin Yao. You are a lord? Yes. You have a village? Obsidian Village. You have soldiers? Lin Yao looked at Zhao Tai and the others. We have just obtained the first batch. Wei Chengshan looked at the 3 new trap formation recruits, and a complex emotion flashed in his eyes. Very weak. Zhao Tai's mouth twitched. But he did not dare refute. Wei Chengshan continued, but at least they can still stand. Gao Mu said in a low voice, General, they suppressed Broken Flag Slope last night. Wei Chengshan looked at Gao Mu. His gaze remained there for a long time.
You are a remnant of the trap formation army? Gao Mu knelt on one knee.
Gao Mu, rear soldier of the trap formation. Wei Chengshan was silent.
After a long time, he said, is there still anyone who remembers the trap formation army? Gao Mu's voice trembled. There are people who remember.
Wei Chengshan nodded.
Then he looked at Lin Yao.
Since you have checked the accounts, determined the crime, settled the debt accounts, pacified the military accounts, and accepted the order to seal the weapon tomb, then now, you must rule on this general's crime.
A system prompt surfaced. Third floor ruling, Blackstone Guardian General Wei Chengshan.
The ruling choice will affect military morale, public morale, starved resentment, and the weapon tomb mainline.
Please answer carefully. Everyone held their breath. Lin Yao did not choose immediately. He reviewed every clue step by step.
Wei Chengshan was responsible. Because he sealed the warehouse, causing large numbers of civilian laborers and refugees to starve to death. But he was not the main criminal. The grain supervisor had embezzled grain, causing an already difficult distribution to collapse completely.
By the time Wei Chengshan discovered it, the situation was already irreversible.
He chose the soldiers. He sacrificed the civilian laborers and refugees in exchange for one final chance to seal the weapon tomb crack. That choice was cruel. But it could not simply be judged as a private crime.
Lin Yao raised his head. Wei Chengshan, you bear responsibility. Wei Chengshan did not move. The warehouse sealing order led to countless starved dead outside the warehouse. This responsibility cannot be erased.
The whispers of the starved soldiers' souls rose again. But this time, they did not riot. Lin Yao continued, but you have no private crime. You did not seal grain for yourself, not for nobles, and not to flee with your life. You sealed the warehouse to seal the weapon tomb. Therefore, you bear a general's responsibility, but not a corruption crime. The military council chamber shook. The soldier remnants lowered their heads. The starved soldiers' souls were silent. Wei Chengshan closed his eyes. It was as if he had finally waited for a verdict that was neither absolution nor slander. Lin Yao finally said, Obsidian Village will accept the order to seal the weapon tomb. But we will also record the starved debt accounts. If Obsidian Village raises a steal in the future, it will write clearly. The grain supervisor was guilty. The Guardian General bore responsibility. The starved dead were innocent. The soldiers were not ashamed. As his words fell, the military grain talisman blazed with light.
Ruling accepted.
You did not push all guilt onto the Guardian General, nor did you erase the resentment of the starved dead. Blackstone Guardian General Wei Chengshan's remnant soul has been archived. Military grain cellar resentment greatly decreased. You have obtained recognition of the Blackstone Guardian General. You have obtained clue to completing the weapon tomb sealing military order. Wei Chengshan looked at Lin Yao and slowly raised his hand in a military salute.
Lord Lin, if you truly intend to seal the weapon tomb, first establish the army. Then establish the grain. Finally, raise the steel. Lin Yao asked, why raise the steel?
Wei Chengshan answered, without a steel, later generations will only remember the treasure.
They will not remember the calamity.
His figure began to fade. On the military table, a black general's order slowly surfaced. You have obtained Blackstone Guardian General Token Fragment. Use, one component of the weapon tomb sealing military order. Hint, only by gathering the military order, war banner, altar, and troop type can the outer sealed zone of the weapon tomb be entered.
After Wei Chengshan's remnant soul dispersed, the door of the third floor council chamber opened completely. Behind the door was not a fourth floor. It was a small ceiling platform.
On the platform lay a blueprint and an uncarved black steel blank.
Lin Yao walked forward.
You have obtained military granary blueprint. You have obtained starved dead steel blank.
Military granary blueprint can be used to construct a logistics building in the territory, improving grain preservation and distribution efficiency.
Starved dead steel blank can be erected within the territory or outside the military grain cellar, used to record debt accounts and pacify resentment. When Xin Xianzhou saw the blueprint, his eyes instantly sharpened.
A logistics building blueprint.
This was one of the things the Xin Corporation wanted most. But the contract was written very clearly. The Xin Corporation only had bidding rights. It did not have priority selection rights. And this blueprint was now in Lin Yao's hand.
Lin Yao put away the blueprint.
The military grain cellar mission has not settled yet.
Xin Xianzhou looked at him and did not ask for it. Because he knew this was not the time. But everyone understood.
The most important return from the military grain cellar had already appeared.
A building blueprint that could improve territorial logistics. For any lord force, this was not an ordinary item.
This was a foundation.